We're back. We're back.
Week 6 wrap up. Three guys, many games. We're back. We got a special guest filling in for Smalley. Because Smalley was on location and then he disappeared. He might not have made it back from Happy Valley for all we know. We got Frankie T, the recent Hall of Fame
Frankie
inductee.
T.
Let's get some cheering for him. By my big brother Vin. Vin, we have a good week this week.
I had terrible in my picks, but I enjoyed watching the games. I can't pick anything right.
Well, the picks are a bloodbath. Just to give you an update on where the picks are, the fans are in the lead. The fans have a 4-game lead over me and a 5-game lead over Smalls and Smalls and Vin. So we're way behind right now. We got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, but worse than that, I think like what, like 6 games, 7 games below 500.
Exactly.
That's bad. I see, when they do the picks on Inside Lacrosse and these did, they're not using the point spread. I think our record
Yeah,
would be much better with no point.
yeah,
It's the
of
point
course.
spread that's really makes it tough.
Yeah. But we've been way off anyway. We've been off on games that I don't even know that the spread mattered that much. There's been a lot of upsets so far. There's been a lot of upsets. The fans, I think, dial in on the chalk. They go for the favorites all the time, and a lot of upsets happen from week to week. You know,
Yeah.
but just to talk, going back because we really weren't on at the end of the week last week. We had the opportunity to see the Marquette game at Harvard, where Harvard and Jerry Byrne, our friend, came down to play at Chaminade. Chaminade put on a great event. This weekend there's an event at Farmingdale College with Duke playing Providence. Hopefully, it's a similar atmosphere. What do you think, Vin? Each week, a neutral site game. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's exciting if there is a game, just about every week or every other week down on the island with teams we don't get to see. There's a little issue right now with Hofstra, not getting that turf down. The weather really screwed them up, so they've been playing their games out of Farmingdale State University. But to get to see top Division 1 teams, I mean, Harvard is up there now. What are they ranked fourth, I think, or something in this latest poll? Still undefeated. Marquette came out on fire in that game and took a lead early. Harvard just wore them down. But I think from those schools, any school that's playing down here on the island, to get exposure because we know how much recruiting gets done from the islands. Just to be able to see these teams play here, it's a lot of fun.
I'll bring
I got
Frankie
Harvard.
T
I
on
like
this
Harvard
because
for the Final Four. Sorry, Steve.
listen,
Wow.
they're a for real team. Look, we're seeing the emergence of Harvard, but you're a local guy. So is it a problem that yes, it's great seeing these teams come in and play, in Long Island. It's the Mecca, so they come down and they play these neutral site games. But how about let's beef up our own local guys? We got to get our local guys to start to be relevant in uh, in the games, don't we?
100%.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, Jerry.
look, the low Adelphi is definitely relevant. I mean, Adelphi in Division 2 is been dominating right now. And Post started out LIU started out pretty hot, but whether they're in Division 1 for them to they could maybe win their conference or something like that. But the cream of the crop is still coming out of the ACC. The Ivies are really great this year. The Big Ten, those three conferences still kind of dominate the action.
What do you think, Frankie?
I mean, Post should be able to recruit. I mean, for Division 1, it's a beautiful school, good dorms, good area around there. They were always successful when they were Division 1. Then when they went to D2, it was different. But I mean, they should be able to start beefing it up, bringing some kids in. I don't understand why not. But I like Harvard. I think he's a great coach. I've told you that from the beginning. I have them picked to go to the Final Four this year. I mean, it'd be great to see him go against, Notre Dame in a final or a semifinal game, because I think a lot of Notre Dame's success over the last 30 years was part because of Jerry, and I think he's just doing that now on his own. I think they're a force. I mean, they proved it. You don't beat teams the way you beat them if you're not good. It's not luck, that's for sure.
I think you're in a catch 22 with the local teams. Frank said you got to get the players. Well, you're not going to get the players even on teams like Hofstra or LIU if you're playing a very weak schedule. I went to Post. We didn't have the strongest teams, but we played the strongest teams. So there was a there
Yeah,
was a incentive to go to say, you know what, we're playing all the top teams. I might not be on one of the top teams, but I'm playing against them.
right.
Then that's how you
Yeah,
build the culture. Then you start getting guys. Then you start getting a few good years, and you turn into something. But if you're always playing weaker teams, and obviously you can't help what conference you're in, but certainly the out of conference, if you're never playing some of those bigger teams, it's hard to,
right.
it's
No,
hard
of
to
course.
make your way to the top.
Well, you know what? Again, they used to play all the good teams, back in the day when you were playing, Stephen, and all the guys too. But, even Hofstra, they stopped it the last couple of years, but they would bring in Carolina, they would bring in Hopkins. It brought big crowds. Some of the local kids wanted to stay local. When Delphi was Division 1. Doc used to schedule everybody. That would come down. Maryland came down. Syracuse came down. It was a different time, but they should be able to get back to that. They should be able to get back to even more than Hofstra, because the school and the living grounds in the area is more appealing. I mean, they should be definitely competing on a much higher level since they moved back to Division 1. What do you think, Vin?
Yeah, listen, there's always been that thing about Long Island kids wanting to go away to school, so you don't keep the local talent in the Division 1 schools. But there's something to be said for that. They're not as talented as these other schools, but every now and then, Asha could grab a win over a ranked team. I don't know that LIU's been able to do that yet, but hopefully they'll build towards that.
I'm saying they're not even playing a ranked team now.
Well, that's what
How can you
well,
be
Right.
a ranked team if you're not even playing them?
yeah. Well, some of those ranked teams may want to get a game on the island, but instead of maybe playing them, that's why they're doing these neutral site games with a
Which
higher
I think is
level
nice.
opponent.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the local lacrosse isn't really great, other than
Well,
Adelphi right now.
we get to see two good teams. Most usually, if it's one of these neutral site games, you usually get two ranked teams playing against each other, which is good. Two high ranked teams.
All the point I'm trying to make is it's not so easy to do it for all local teams now. And it's definitely not going to work if you're always playing a very weak schedule, because nobody's going to be interested in watching, and no top recruit is going to be that interested in coming. That being said, talking about a guy who sort of did it in a way, not in the strongest of conferences, but over the time played a monster schedule, built a culture, and now is on the verge of maybe Final Four, even better, is Richmond.
Yeah.
They took their lumps at first. They got beat up a lot by a lot of teams, and and you know, and now they're what are they ranked? 2 right now. Then
Yeah, listen, they're one of the best teams in the country. There's no question about that. They're 6-0. They've their schedule is their out of conference schedule is no joke. Chamati has done a tremendous job with them. You know, they didn't get that Maryland game to start the season, because of the snow. But time will tell. I mean, look, they've beaten two quality teams. Virginia's not turning out to be, he may not turn out to be that much of a win. They beat Virginia, but they beat Robert Morris, Mercer. Lehigh's not bad, but they lumped them up. They had a 1 goal game with Cornell, and they had an impressive 14-10 win over Georgetown. So, they've had back-to-back wins over quality teams. So their number two ranking is well deserved. Look, we saw them up live in person last year in the at Hofstra at the quarterfinals against Cornell, who was the eventual national champ. They had Cornell on the ropes in that game. That game easily could have went either way. It wasn't like that was any kind of fluke. Richmond played their butts off. They're just so well coached, and maybe because we don't recognize the names on some of these guys, because we typically lean towards Long Island guys because we know them, we see them growing up and all of that through high school, but they got a lot of talented players. They play tough, hard nosed defense. They're well coached on the finer points of the game, the clearing game and all of that. So they're going to be somebody to contend with. They believe in themselves. You can see that, and that's the start of something great. Teams got to believe in themselves. Where
Aspire.
I see some other teams right now, they're questioning where they are.
But the way you reeled off that schedule, again, it's their win over Cornell. Cornell is not quite what they were last year. So Cornell is searching for it. So when you look at that schedule for Richmond, and I'm not taking anything away from them because I think they're a for real team, and they're going to play competitive with anybody. I don't think there's anybody in the country that can overlook Richmond. That being said, right now their schedule of their wins that they've been on, there's not really the current top 10 teams, maybe a lot of them in there, or at least top five.
Right.
Um,
And some of the ones that were at one point, they're not showing to be as strong as
right, right.
you know. But you take a team like Duke. Look, Duke, although they've had a number of blowouts, they are blowing teams out. But there's complaints coming from some of our buddies about their schedule and saying, Duke's not playing anybody. They don't even deserve the ranking they have. Who's their best win? Maybe Jacksonville. Utah's not bad, but they are, look, they won by 15, 7, 16, 6, 6, 15.
Well,
They're
they'll
blowing
get
teams
tested
out.
soon. They'll
No,
get
they got,
tested
they
soon.
got Providence, next, and then Denver, which Denver's always tough. But then they hit the ACC schedule, and whether or not, the ACC is, I mean, other than Virginia, I mean, clearly Carolina's pretty top notch. Notre Dame definitely is top. They're number one right now. And Syracuse, it depends which Syracuse team shows up.
Well,
They've been hot and
I'll go
cold.
with my hat. You know, another one on the radar.
Yeah,
From
Princeton.
the Ivies, I think you got to look at Princeton, and that other than their loss to Penn State, which was the first game of the year, they've looked very strong. And the thing that stands out for me for Princeton, they got great goaltending. The goalie on Princeton's very good. And when we're seeing some of the games, maybe some of these teams are taking losses because they're a little weaker, in the cage, and that's why you're seeing a little bit of inconsistency with some of the top programs. If they're a little shaky in the cage, you know, games can start going down fast. The game that Smalls went to, he took the ride, he did his whole show, he was at the bagel place, he did a lot of eating. I know that Smalls has a good
Yeah,
company.
yeah, yeah. Our friend
Yeah.
Eating
And
that
Mike
then he'll come
Ferrone with
back
the
and tell us,
tailgate.
yeah. And then he'll tell us he lost 5 pounds. That's what he usually does. He
Penn
eats like an
State, Penn
animal and he'll
State,
go, look,
both
I
Penn
lost
State
five
and
pounds.
Cornell are known for they're known for their
Yeah, he
tailgates.
he was eating the both of them, I'm sure. He
they
was
had
definitely eating the both of them.
I think the tallies were like, let's see how much it was. It was like 400 hot dogs. Oh, 75 BEC sandwiches, 125 hot dogs, 50 hamburgers. 13 pounds of filet mignon. They had a big day there at Penn State, and they came out and pretty much pounded Cornell from the start. I mean, the game was over in the first 10 minutes.
They gave him a beating. I can't believe what a beating they gave him.
You know,
I
what
don't
do
think
you
Yeah,
do?
Cornell's going to
What
make
do
the.
you do?
I don't think Cornell's going to make the Final Four this year. I hate to say that because I love Cornell, but I don't think they have
Well,
the
you're saying
offensive
come on,
firepower there.
you're saying Final Four. I'm gonna ask Vinny. Does the Ivy have 3 teams in it, and is Cornell one of them?
I don't
yeah.
think so.
I think Ivies get three, and I
Yeah.
think Cornell
Yeah,
will be one.
you
I
do.
think so. Yeah, I do.
I think.
I do.
All right. Okay.
Because I think that the conference that may have less than they usually have is Big Ten. But this is all speculation, especially this season. I mean, we're not even into conference play yet, but this season is really. I mean, I'm following the game for a long time. I never would have believed that Penn State could do what they did to Cornell in that game, and yet Penn State lost to Villanova, who's not a terrible team, but
It's the Navy.
and lost to Navy. So this is crazy. It's like on any given day it seems, but you would say based on some of these comparative scores. But I think, as we get past the midway point and they get into conference play, the cream's going to rise to the top. It's of course the things that can tilt this thing is if there's injuries to key players or whatever, or depending on how teams match up against each other. But, other than that first game of the season for Princeton, they've been pretty dominant, and in all fairness to them, when they played their first game and lost, they always start later, the IVs. They probably didn't have that much field time, but they seem to be kicking it in gear pretty good, Princeton. They're going to be a tough team to beat because you said the goaltending, and they're pretty good at X too. They win faceoffs. So, and their offense is methodical. They got a lot of different guys that can score. So, I mean, this is one of the most fun seasons in a long time. I mean, take Syracuse. I mean, I still like Syracuse a lot because they got some guys who've been playing, between Spallina and Mikey Leo, and some of these guys, Dwan, they're playing since they're freshmen. They got so much game experience, but yet they were a team that was close to having 3 losses in a row to 3 Ivy League teams. I mean, they lost to Harvard, the goal. They lost to Princeton 11-7. And then they're in a game with Penn where they were down 8-4. They had to score 5 goals to come back and win 9-8 and score one in overtime. Mikey Leo with the game winner to win it. I mean, they beat Hopkins 12-8. Hopkins had a win over Virginia, so everybody was jumping up and down about that. But meanwhile, Virginia's not really looking so strong at this point. They're struggling. So at the end of it,
But again, you see, this is where every game really matters. So everybody talks about the non-conference. We're talking about when they line up for picking the NCAAs, and we're saying, is the Ivy League 3 teams or 2 teams? Is the Big Ten 3 teams or 2 teams? Those are the games that matter. How did your conference do against the other conference?
yeah,
Those mismatch games of the interconference start to matter. You know, Penn State beating up on the Ivy League, then you would say, okay, well, the Big Ten, Penn State's in the Big Ten. If they don't win the Big Ten, Penn State, they certainly could end up the second or third team. And if they get 3 teams, then somebody else is not getting 3 teams. You know.
yeah. When you talk about 3 teams, you putting Michigan to the side right now, but think about it. You got Penn State, you got Ohio State, right? You got Ohio State who lost a 1 goal game to the number one team in the country.
Right. Right.
And then you still have Maryland is, we'll see how they can progress. They've had some tough losses. Maybe this is just the year that they're not going to be there. and who's the other team in there?
Well,
I don't
Michigan,
know.
you know,
Michigan. I think Michigan and Hopkins. I think they're the ones that are on. I don't think they're going to have a tough time making it. I think they're going to need more quality wins.
Yeah,
If
Maryland can't lose too many
Virginia,
more games.
no, Maryland is on the ropes there too. But I don't know. I just see it as you know, can Michigan or Rutgers, get hot and beat? What throws the whole thing out of whack is if some team that has not playing so great ends up winning and getting an AQ. If a team gets an AQ, then that really throws those selectors are hoping that the teams that, are highly ranked, they win their conferences. So that puts less pressure on them in terms of the picks. You get a team that's been top of their conference all year, and then at the end they falter in the tournament and they get knocked out, even like say in the first round. What do you do with them?
Yeah.
is
Yep.
let me ask you this, Tash: is the Big East a two-team tournament? You know, by two-team bids? Do they get two teams? The
I
Big
don't
East?
know. Maybe one.
I
What do
mean,
you
it's
think?
possible. I mean, it's possible. I mean, you have whoever's going to win obviously gets in, but the rest of the conference hasn't played super strong, and
Yeah.
I don't know that you could sit there and say that one of those other teams is an automatic. So Big East could go from a 2 to a 1. Does that now make that gives another conference the ability to have three? But if you remember, Vin, it wasn't that long ago when the ACC was almost an automatic 5 teams sometimes, certainly 4.
Yeah.
But now I think you would have to put them maybe back to 3. No,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think,
Unless Maryland comes on strong. Yeah.
no, Maryland's Big Ten, but ACC, I mean, I could
Oh,
easily
that's
see, I think Syracuse gets in. I think Carolina gets in. Notre Dame gets in. There's 3. After that, Virginia. I don't think Virginia's making it this year. I
and you
don't think
have
they're
Duke,
going to.
and you have Duke.
And Duke is the 4th. So I think ACC could get 4th. Duke, we got to see what they're really made of. I mean, they're blowing teams out, but they're going to get into the meat of their schedule soon, and we'll see. I mean, if they lose every game to those teams that are in the rankings right now, I mean, the teams they beat, I don't think none of them are in the top 20, you know.
Right.
So
Well, what if Duke beats Syracuse?
no, that's going to be a quality win for them. That changes the whole dynamic of it. If they get a couple of wins in the ACC but still don't win the ACC, I think they still get a bid. It's going to be hard to put a team from some of those other conferences over them if they beat a couple of those higher ranked ACC teams.
And that's where it gets dicey, because as soon as if you potentially put 4 in the ACC, then, like Tash is saying, Maryland on the back end of the Big Ten could be in trouble, or the third Ivy team could be in trouble. And so it's it, these are why every game matters. There are no games that don't matter during the season. They're going to point back to some of these games, and it could be a game in February that puts the nail in your coffin.
That's true. When it gets down to 2 teams that are vying for that spot, and there was a head-to-head game, and the team that won in the head-to-head, they're clearly going to have the edge. But there's a lot of lacrosse
Yeah.
to
Well,
be
it's
played.
still
I
early.
mean, we
It's
could
still
keep
yeah. It's still
speculating
early.
about who gets in and who doesn't, but we should talk more about who looks, what teams look like, or the players from the teams. There's some players that are really doing a lot of scoring. Um, Spallina, he had that shutout game where he got held to 0-0, but he bounced back good this weekend against Hopkins, put up 7 points. You know, uh, Virginia's struggling, but meanwhile, the Millins, they're putting up all kinds of points. They're averaging a little over 10 points a
They're
game
attack
between them.
heavy. Yeah, though their middies don't score a lot. They're all attack heavy with all of their scoring, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But past that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Uh, the Georgetown team, where would they get scoring other than if those Connor brothers didn't transfer in? They're not getting scoring out of other guys. He's holding up his end. I mean, they got beat, but guy had like 6 goals this weekend or something. I think
Yeah,
7 points, 6-1, something like that. There's certain guys that are they're doing what people expected them to do, but it shows that you don't win in this game unless you're getting contributions from everybody. So some of these, other guys have to start stepping up if these teams are going to be successful.
Georgetown has played. They're playing some very very tough teams. I mean, the three losses they have are in a row. Because they're 1-3. They're all within the top 10.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's the converse to where I was saying, who was the team that I was saying, look, whether you say Duke and you say, okay, well, they're 6-0, but they don't have a win inside the top 10. They haven't
right,
played anybody in there. or
right,
or the Richmond win against Cornell, where Cornell is right at 10 or just outside the 10. Was that, so
yeah.
Georgetown played all pretty strong teams, the
No,
last
Yeah,
three.
yes,
Georgetown's not talking anybody. They're not talking
yeah.
anybody.
They're battle tested. I mean, look, their next games they got Albany, Loyola. Those are less talented teams than they've been playing in those games that they lost. When they lost to Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Richmond in succession. That's like top five
Right,
losses.
right.
If they could knock off Albany and Loyola, and then they get themselves back to 3-3. But then they're hitting. Then they got Syracuse. So he's not ducking anybody. Syracuse is not in their conference. They didn't have to play them, but they're playing them. So, then they get into their conference. Denver, Providence, Marquette, St. John's and Villanova, so I mean, I think they have a very good chance of winning their conference or going to the finals of their conference. I mean, Nova's a strange team. Somehow they beat Penn State, but they struggled. I was watching that game yesterday against Penn. They couldn't
Yeah.
score for anything. Penn held them down. But Penn's been tough defensively. They got good face-off, good goalie too. That team. I mean, they had Syracuse. That would have been some feather in their cap. They could have closed that game out. So, to me, it's so interesting. Like, who's going to emerge as players? Who's going to emerge as teams? And really, who's going to emerge coaching? Tash is a former coach. He knows how important it is to game plan and put their best product on the field and somehow motivate these players. And there may be some kid on the bench right now hasn't played much or played very that if they give somebody an opportunity, could be a game changer.
I mean, I'll tell you one thing that I think we both discussed this. The man up is terrible on a lot of these teams. They throw the ball 90 times on a 30-second penalty without even getting a shot off. Like they're so far outside the box, some of them. I don't know, understand that, right? We were talking about that, right, Vinny? I mean, you got to be able to pick off two,
Yeah,
three
the one.
man ups a game, in order to win these tight games. But
Yeah,
some of the man up that 1 for 5, 1 for 6, that should not be with the level of talent. And they don't even get off a lot of shots. I don't. They move guys around. They do a little loop underneath. They pass it. It's like they want a 4 foot shot. They got to be able to crank some shots. They're playing too far out from what I see.
yeah,
I'm no genius, but I just know not a lot of people are scoring outside the restraint line these days.
Not that the game wasn't over, but I'm watching the Penn Villanova game, and is 40 seconds to go and they're down, 3 goals. But the other team got penalties. They're actually playing. They were playing like 5 against 3, or they were 6-on-4. They were 2 men up, and they were still passing it around like 7 passes and not taking a shot. 40 seconds to go.
I don't
I'm
understand.
like,
I
when are you gonna shoot?
I can
yeah,
tell you,
yeah. Well,
if you
look,
don't press, you got to score at least. you got to score at least 30 to 40% of your man up goals, at least on a low end. You got to be able to do it. You got to be able to get some shots off and move them around. They don't move the defense enough. They move the ball, boom, boom, boom. They don't even move it with authority half the times. They're just kind of throwing it, not a threat to step in and even fake a shot and then move it to somebody else. It's unbelievable how many teams just do that. Man up goals are very important. I mean, it's there's a reason.
What I don't like is conversely to years ago, and this is they move it around. They move it around the outside, but they rarely put. Usually they put two guys behind the goal on the pipes, which then you're outnumbered. But at least go put one guy behind the pipe. Have a point man. Turn the defense. They don't even try to ever really put the ball behind the goal anymore to have like a real feeder. That doesn't seem to
Steven,
work.
Well, I'll say two things to the extra man. One, if a team might have five extra mans in a game, but they're all 30-second penalties, the 30-second penalties, 30 seconds could get eaten up pretty quick. You got to get right into it if you got a 30-second penalty. But what I
that's why
notice
you
is
got to put
on
two
even the
people on
minute
the pipes.
penalties, right? But when I watch, what I'm seeing, it doesn't look to me like when, all the years I played, the teams I was on, we came out and it was like, let's say with Long Island, we had black play, we had the gold play. We would when we went in 3-3, we did more of a freelance, but we had play, but we had designed plays. We ran a play. They don't, when I'm watching these games, I don't see something that looks like a play. It just seems
No,
like a draw and dump, like pass it hard around the outside. Hopefully the other team is a little slow in sliding and then take a shot, or jam it into the crease maybe, you know. But I'm still like old school in terms of, I like plays that you can play off of. I'm not saying you have to limit yourself to just what that play is. You could run the play, and then if the other team is on it, they got it stopped. You have that extra guy. There's got to be where you create. I always thought was best when the one guy behind, was getting the ball and then driving one of the pipes, and it was a 2-on-1 with the guy on the wing. Where the guy he
yeah.
could the defender either had to stop the guy coming around from putting it in, or he had to try to hedge between those two guys. Because the slide to get to the wing guy, if you got a good wing shooter, I mean, guys like Matt Crowley, they made a living with those wing shots. We tried to make that happen, and then we had guys for years that were great on the inside. We ran a
That's because
Swino is automatic.
there was a dedicated guy
yeah
behind the goal, and it turned the defense, and then the offense was initiated really from behind the goal, coming from
yeah.
behind the goal. So they don't
No,
really
but
do that.
Vinny, God, Steve, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was saying, Vinny, you remember like when I was at Tech that year with all those great players. We used to run a freelance to reverse 1-3-2. We did a 2-3-1, but the guys on the pipes were a threat. If they didn't go to the wing, they were dipping and dunking underneath. We were 51% that year in 2008 when
Yeah.
we didn't run we ran maybe 3 plays out of 100 the whole year. We were 51%. That's an unbelievable
Yeah.
percentage. I mean, just in man up, but they don't move the ball. They don't move it with authority like they're a threat. They kind of not lob it, but they don't move it like they're a threat to step in it. Some do, some don't, but not all six guys. They're definitely not
Well, what I'm
on. I mean,
what
we
no,
all,
but the thing I'm not seeing on the extra man is we always had extra mans that there was cutters. You cut. Guy was cutting. I mean, you can't get more. You mentioned Swino. You couldn't do more than a simpler play than that goal play that he was started on the wing, looking at the goal. He was on the right wing, and then the ball rotated, and then he just cut across. And
yeah,
the crease guy
opened up
cut
a
to the
lane.
right pipe. Swino went to the left pipe. It was like a catch and shoot. It was like layups.
Well,
Yeah.
the reason that they're doing that is because there's a change in the formation. You're changing from a 1-3-2 to a
Right.
1-4-1, at that
Right.
point. So every play that you mentioned with Long Island, black, Long Island, gold, they're all plays that start in a 1-3-2 and end up in a one.
Most
Yeah.
of the time. Most of the time. But we
But
we
the ball
sometimes
moved.
did,
Nobody held it.
rarely. We almost always did a 1-3-2 from behind the cage. Sometimes we did a 3-3. I mean, there were teams that ran 3-3s. You know, thinking back in club lacrosse, Maryland Lacrosse Club ran a 3-3, second to none, with Cottle
Yeah.
almost playing like center in basketball. That in the middle of the down low spot, they'd feed him from the top to him, and he'd turn and throw it down to one of the. He most of the time, because he was a lefty, throw it to the guy on that other side, and then they cross crease to the other guy, and it was a layup. They were so
He was
effective, but
automatic.
again,
Yeah.
yeah, it's more. When I don't see them making a defense make a full rotation. You know what I'm saying? You're not forcing a rotation, so it's a long slide. So, like you say, a guy can do with the way these guys shoot. They shoot much better than we ever did. So if you can
Oh,
get it to
forget
where
it.
you get them rotating, and a guy is stepping in on a 10-yard shot, most of these kids are going to can it. They shoot
I'll
so well.
toss it over to box if you remember, because again, I think that when you don't put somebody behind the goal, and Frankie talked about this a little bit. He's saying the guys are not moving it good because you know why? You're relying on the feel of the game and the spacing of the guy himself. You're not doing a play, right? So you're relying on the guys to figure it out themselves when you're in that freelance or that sort of 3-3. So that's how indoor really is when you're a power play. You're trying to figure the 5-on-4. You're trying to figure out the spacing. But now look at what they're doing in indoor. They're putting a guy behind the goal a lot of times now in indoor
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they've
yeah.
figured out that
And they
that's not
try
a
to
bad
jump.
play sometimes. Think that
This,
it's like bell bottoms coming back in style. I think you might start to see if they
my
get a
polyester
guy
sweatsuits, Vinny. I got the polyester
right.
back. Wait till you see
He's
the
So
first
you
back.
home
Tish
game
is
at
back.
Hofstra. I'm going to show you guys
right.
some 80s school stuff. Are you kidding? Listen, guys, I got to jump
You
off.
you
All
have
right.
a
Wait,
Puma?
wait
Go
till you
ahead.
see the
You got a
poly. I It's a total surprise. I got polyester is back. Saturday Night Fever. Wait till you see this sweatsuit. I'm gonna bust it out,
you got
guys.
it.
Thank you for letting me
Sign
on. I
off, but keep
appreciate
that
it.
keep
All
that
right,
keep that
All
app
right,
open
Tish.
because you got some uploading.
you
Keep
got it.
that
You
app
got it,
open.
guys. Thank
Keep it
you.
open so it
Thank you, guys.
uploads, Tish.
You got it. Bye bye.
So Vin, that's what I think. I think that it's gonna come back. They're gonna have to come back. They're gonna have to you know think about doing the guy behind.
Yeah.
I think that's a better, more effective.
Well, there are teams that put guys at X. I mean, I always feel like it's so easy to create, like if the ball is rotating counterclockwise and it gets from that wing, guy steps in, somebody's got to play a wing guy as a shooter,
Right.
and now he dumps it down to the guy who's behind the goal. They don't have to. Then you're not going to go cover the guy behind the goal, but he's either going to try to sneak left-handed, like if it's coming from that wing, he's going to catch it lefty and try to shoot it in, or he could catch it lefty and drive the right pipe. And now the defender's got to come all the way out. There maybe got to be a guy who's got to slide from cross crease. Depends how defenses decide to play it. There's different styles teams play, but they're making it easier for these teams because they're kind of packing it in when you don't have what caught from my point of view. I listen, it's just my opinion. These guys they're professional coaches, but I've seen a lot of lacrosse, and I just know all the times I played, it was when you put guys cutting through and you put the defenders, because you got one short, right?
Right.
You're putting defenders in a bind. How far am I going with this guy as he's cutting? When do I release him to somebody else? You know, what happens if I stay with him too long as he's cutting through the crease and this other guy rotates up and he's getting an 8-yard shot that I'm maybe got to recover to? You want to make defenders have to make decisions. And I just think that when everybody stands still, no matter what formation you're in, and there's no cutter through or anything like that, and it's just you're trying to outpace them, pass faster than they can move and get there. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm just not.
The other thing about the 1-3-2, and I'm telling you, Long Island, every one of those plays cuts into a 1-4-1, changes the formation, and when a defense typically against the 1-3-2 is in like a 2-1 formation, that's not the defense you want to be when you're against a 1-4-1. So they've
Right.
actually cut and changed the formation where the defense, because their heads turn, they don't realize it's changed. That's why it works. That's why those guys are open. And the other thing I think it does is when you have arguably one of your smarter field vision players behind the goal, it takes away when you're playing that everybody trying to figure it out in front of the goal. Everybody has to have field vision of where to space themselves and that. You're putting a lot of the decision making into that one guy's stick. And if he's a smart guy, you probably know he's going to make some good decisions compared to putting more decisions in four or five guys' hands. You know.
Right. No, no, I agree with that. But it's interesting when you think about it, like Frank was saying, whatever I'd like to see the statistics on the season, who's the top extra man team and what their percentage is and how it filters down. I was saying, you know, when I was at Hofstra and we played a zone a lot. Hofstra was known as a zone team, and how it started with Howdy Myers and Harry Royal continued it. And there were a lot of guys who weren't crazy about the zone, although Carolina played zone and won in the 80s some championships playing some zone. You got to have the keeper. I mean, they had Tommy Sears. If you got a great keeper, that's a plus. But we had a couple zone defenses. We had one. It was called like backer zone backer or something, where we would play almost like we were man down, play like a five zone. And one of our poles, usually when I was in school, was Eddie Wallace. Like he roamed the end line. Like the other team took a shot and they missed it. And we got the ball. They turned it over. And the more I see how these teams play extra man, it's almost like you could give yourself an advantage doing that if they don't figure it out. Because you get it's one shot and done. But past that, I think about the other side of it. We actually had a defense where the guy stayed up behind them on the midline.
Yeah,
Played for you was like you're playing man down. So
right,
you can literally put a short stick guy 5 yards from the midline,
right,
play man down, goalie makes a save, throws it. They got a 4-on-3 going the
right,
other way.
exactly. That would be, listen,
And,
those.
what I'm saying is you're just playing percentages because they're not really scoring that much percentage wise on extra man anyway.
Exactly. And if you're not one of the strongest teams, maybe that's a little bit outside the box. That gives if you're playing against a stout defense, maybe you do want to get some 4-on-3s to give you a
Yes.
better chance to score. Yeah, I mean those
Yes.
are kinds of things. I mean that's really unorthodox, but it would be something to try.
Yeah. I mean, look, like I said, I always kind of believed in when you're a team, especially if you're an underdog, it's like a lot of times teams just continue to play good enough to lose. Okay, we're better this year. We lost by 8 to them last year. We lost by 6 this year. We're getting there. You never get there. To me, if I was coaching, depending on the personnel I had, I'd throw caution to the wind. I do a lot of different things like that just to throw another team off, see how they react to it. It may work, it may not work, but I'd fool with it along the way, tinker with it. The truth is, I think a lot of guys playing would have fun playing in it. I mean, we had games. I don't know if you remember. You hadn't played. You were still in high school. I think you had one more year of high school, so you didn't play when we first had that team in Caniac.
Right,
And
right,
there were games. We only had four defensemen, and one time three guys didn't show up, and we played with nine short sticks and one pole, which was Petro, which was like having two poles anyway with him out
right.
there. He was great, even though he was just out of high school. But you know. we created transition. We were like, okay, even though I'm really playing defense, if I get a ball and I'm going and I can create a break, stay on side or
Make
you
sure you
go.
count.
Yeah, and I mean, we caught those teams like trying to sub when we were already in a four on. You can see it's going to develop into a 4-on-3 or a 5-on-4, and we're scoring layups, and we're using all short stick guys.
Yeah,
So I mean,
and every guy with the short stick is a capable two-way guy who can handle the stick on the offensive end.
yeah,
So it really doesn't matter.
yes, yes, yeah, right. That well, you got to have those kind of players,
Right.
But I think some of these short stick guys don't get enough credit for how capable they are to play offense. I think they kind of get pigeonholed, but you see them. Some of these guys that played short stick D in college, and now they're playing in the PLL, or all of a sudden you see them in the sixes, and you're like, this guy's good with a short stick. He can play. So
There's a
I
difference. And there's a difference between that type of guy who can run up and he's capable of, beelining and shooting a shot on the run and maybe scoring and being an athlete, to where you're in an offense and you got to make decisions and you got to
right,
make the right passes, or you got to know when to not make a pass.
yeah,
And there are
yeah,
guys that are smoother and more sophisticated with that, and that's why they're offensive players. And there are guys that play D midi, for
yeah.
that reason. You know, it doesn't mean that any of the guys that you see in college that are D middies aren't capable of playing offense, but playing offense like in a 6-on-6 setting, sometimes that's why they're on defense. You start to realize the decision making and whether or not they can make those type of passes.
Yeah, and conversely, there's offensive players that I think, it's a mentality to play defense, but it's more than just playing a guy being capable of somewhat staying on a guy one on one.
Right.
It has to do with understanding how to play team defense. Where should I force this guy to go? Where I know I could get help. But in all fairness, they're not, they're not practiced with that. They're not coached with that because it's not really what they're doing. It's a different world in terms of how they micromanage players to some degree. But to have a player or some of these midfield studs that could really do everything, like that kid on Syracuse last year. He was great at both ends.
Yeah.
There are guys. I just think if you give more guys that chance to do it, I think they just need time on the field. And I think there are offensive players that you can, instead of giving up a break or running them off in the substitution game, they can get back and play D because you go, usually our substitution patterns used to be offense, defense, out, right? You
Yeah.
go in and be play. Oh, did they transition it? We didn't run to the box. You played defense, but then you were a little tired. And then when you got the ball back and came up, unless it was a break, you threw it down the field and you came off, and fresh middies came in.
Well, if you remember, and by this point you were a little older and you started playing a little more attack, but then you went back to playing midfield, because when you first MLL you were starting playing attack, but then even by the second year you went back. We were playing midfield together because that was actually
Yeah.
working out better. But if you remember those practices back when our dear friend John D. Tommaso was the coach, and his brother James and Norm, you know, as midfielders, we spent quite a bit of time on the defensive half practicing also. Like we would
Yeah.
actually go through the skeleton and we had to know the both sides. So that was actually, I wonder how much a midfielder, an offensive midfielder now, how much time does he actually spend with the defense, learning whatever defenses they're doing?
No, zero. I would guess very little, very, very little, but again, you go back to those days and now you got a mix of guys. We had older guy like myself. You had older guys on the team that did have some,
No, 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 no.
experiences.
Get it right. I was older. You were ancient.
Yeah. Exactly. But we had guys who had experience of doing being two-way middies, playing in the days of where you were a two-way
Right.
player. And then you had, guys like, AJ and all that didn't they're great players, but they didn't really have a lot of time on the defensive side of the field in college. So, it was like if they got caught on defense, they were like, "What do I do?" But I look at the different things we did sometimes in practice just for fun. And I remember one day we were playing half field, and the six guys that were playing offense, you couldn't get much better than the six guys that were. I mean, they were all stud players that were playing offense. James Dito, who was really coaching the defense. I don't know if you remember, we actually had like different, we had a black defense, we called it a green, but we were doing what was like green, I think it was, where it was if you're on the ball and the guy is taking you hard, say he's a right handed guy, going to start to drive hard right handed, you totally overplayed the guy to that hand. And even if you were enticing him to roll back with how aggressive you were at cutting him off. He really had to cut back because you took it away. And we used to send the adjacent just doubled. As soon as the guy started to run, the guy was already coming because he knew he was getting cut off. And we did that one practice from a defensive standpoint. We played for like 20 minutes, 6-on-6, and they couldn't score. And I remember Nito saying, I think maybe we should just do this in the game, which to me, that's what I say. If you're some of these teams, come up with a defense that could create turnovers, that could create a fast break. You're going to just play the same style week after week after week and just keep losing and going, oh, we're getting better. Well, I was starting to get it, but meanwhile, you never win. To
What you do,
me, the fun
what
of
you
it,
what you're doing with that is you're changing the tempo and you're making a team who may want to be doing one thing, you're forcing them to do something else like that, and you're
yeah,
making them play in an environment where it's not going exactly how they expect it to go. Something different
yeah.
is thrown at them. And and yes, that makes teams play fast. You start making the game go up and down more.
Will they be able to think? Would can they think it? Like Dito used to tell me when he was at Hopkins, a lot of times the guy was on there's a D guy on the ball playing a guy, and they shut off adjacent. So what do
Right,
you do when they shut off adjacents? Do the adjacent guys just keep moving out further and further from the cage, or does the
right,
guy know to cut through and get replaced, and then somebody could get an outlet? You know what I
yeah.
mean? Little things like that to take a team off of what they want to do. Now, can you get burned with that every now and then? Sure, you're gonna get burned every now and then, doing those things. But I just think it makes players think faster, think better, and become better players. And I'll give you my last one that I watched, a lot of games. The thing that bothers me about how the game is played today, I don't see they're much more used to doing, they do a throw down, pick down, they pick behind the cage, they do big littles all over the place. There's a lot of setting of picks for the ball,
Right,
right? There's no picking off the ball.
right,
There's no I watch game after game, and depending on how the TV, the camera guys show the angle of the game, sometimes you can't see everybody on the field, right? But when I usually can see everybody on the field, I'm looking for where the guy is like, I had the ball, I'm coming down the right wing, I throw it to, I throw it to the wing, the guy throws it to X, the guy then, runs down, sets a pick on, back picks my guy, and I'm coming off it.
right.
We always, that's how we played the game. Backpick a guy when he can't see, make the defense get confused. You're trying to confuse the defense when a guy. How many times we say, "Why don't these teams just crash the pick? Why does a short stick guy so afraid of getting on an
Well,
attackman?
you know,
Guy comes around free and scores.
you
Same thing
said
if you pick.
you you're saying you. I know you're a crash picker. You like the crash pick, and if you remember that Penn game with Syracuse that ended up in OT. Before it ended up in OT, when it was tied, I think it was Syracuse had the ball. I'm not sure how much time was on the clock. It was still in the regular before it went to overtime, and they gave the ball to Joey Spallina, and they had it set up where he was going, whatever the play they were doing, he was going behind to. They went to set a pick on him, and the guy really jumped it. Like the guy really went out and played him hard,
Yeah.
and the guy was, and the pole was on him. And he did throw it, but he didn't really throw a great pass to the guy who was trying to slip out. And it was like bouncing. And the next guy actually, the defenseman, they were anticipating it. He ended up getting there also. And like,
Yeah.
check that next guy, the drift guy. So they were all in sync. So it just shows you, like, when you're aggressive, sometimes that works too. Like,
No, I like the aggressiveness. The aggressiveness maybe cost them at the end of the game. They doubled early, and it's not the time. You didn't really need to double when a guy's behind the cage as much as when he's really in a danger spot. But I guess the kid figured he was had leverage, and so he went. And then there was a little rotation, and the ball got up to Mikey Leo Fish, our guy, got it, and the kid was in a bad position for a closeout. And he just whoop, he dipped right under the guy, and he put it in. But you know, that's all a feel. It's all a feel. But you could say, well, it was a bad play. But them being in that game the way they were, they made plays like that all day, and they made those plays. That's what kept them in the game. So I mean, look, it's going to happen. Other guys are going to adjust too. But I was always, as a player, I was like a percentage player. I like certain things that I rather know exactly what I'm asked to do and go do it and be good at it fundamentally. I think that works when guys, you want to put guys in confused states. Do I switch? Do I pick? Do I, all of that. So the fact that nobody, picks away from the ball, it's just always bouncing on the outside, out bouncing, bouncing. Oh, the guy tests it. Oh, maybe a guy took an extra step on a double, thought the guy was beat. Now he throws it. Now the guy gets a bad closeout. He maybe gets a by him. To me, you can make the game. If you remember when we used to practice with those young guys that we used to do those little like clinic playing things at Alley Pond Park, my rule was when we used to play 6-on-6, I used to say, when you get the ball, when you throw it to somebody else, you either pick down for that whoever you throw it to, you go set a pick for him, you do a give and go with him, or you set a pick away from him. I said, and when that guy is doing that, the other three guys, you don't just watch the game. You should be interchanging positions so your defender can't lock in to be a help guy. You move them. And we
exactly.
used to do that. And guys used to say to me, our offense would, they'd score a lot. And they'd say, wow, this is a great offense. I'm like, it's really not an offense. It's just motion. It's just having a rule of thumb where guys are occupying defenders, moving defenders. And then, of course, when that happens, a guy who's a good one-on-one player, now he doesn't have backup there or doesn't have to worry about getting doubled because it's clear for him. So
Well,
I just.
I definitely think that that's something that, you see different guys that can be very, very effective, working away from the ball. And I say, if you think you can dodge, you think it's important to dodge people, and you always, like Postel would say, you have to have somebody who gets inside the defense or gets the defense moving.
Right,
But when a defender is guarding the ball, he really is focused in because he doesn't want to get beat. He's in that.
right,
It's when the ball is not around that they relax, and when they also have to turn their head and they have to know where
right.
things are. To me, it's easier, and you could almost dodge the guy. Why can't you dodge the guy when you don't have the ball? Do the same thing. Be elusive.
Yeah,
Be
yeah,
elusive just like you would with the ball without it, and they'll have a hard time covering you anyway. You know.
yeah,
And the other thing you do is, like you said, you're occupying your guy. So if he's watching you, then he's not involved in helping wherever the ball is. And if he is helping wherever the ball is, you're probably open.
yeah. Well, I have seen teams like, it's crunch time in games or end of quarters or halves where coaches will call timeouts, and they come out of a timeout and you could tell that's like a set piece. you know it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. The guy gets on his chalkboard or whatever it is, not a chalkboard anymore, these guys are using iPads. But the guy show, here's my six guys. This is what we're going to do. You start with the ball. I want you to go here. If this doesn't happen, you're setting a play. You set a play. It's like these set plays are happening at the end of the game when you're trying to win or trying to score a big goal or something. It's like, why don't they have those plays all game long? I mean, why can't a team come down and like call out a play like football? Like, when you're in a huddle and every play, it's not like a football. They just line up and then they just go and play. There's a play, So I always felt like, there should be more. I mean, look, the fun of lacrosse is it's a little more free flowing and all. But when you get into a 6-on-6 game and half court and how good some of these defenses are and these guys are, with length and all, and they anticipate, to me, not to,
They can talk. They can make all of the greatest offenses in the world, and they can come up with all of these schemes and everything else, and have tremendous defenses and tremendous athletes. But the things that still work are, okay, the give and go and the pass pick opposite. Those
yeah,
things still work. They
yeah.
always work because
I think they may work better now because
they
nobody
might.
really does them. If a team coached that way, and like it's always about, like Vince Lombardi used to say, every play on offense is designed to score a touchdown. You didn't design in most cases, you might want to just pick up some yards or some, but if this guy blocks this guy, if everything goes right on a football field and everybody did their job, the guy's scoring a touchdown because you blocked the linebacker, this guy get this, you know. So lacrosse is the same way. It's all about execution. His
Yeah.
point was that if you execute, even if they know what you're going to do, it's hard to stop.
I remember a time going back to extra mans. I remember a time when we had been getting ready to go down south, I think, and play, either the club semifinals or maybe even the club championship. And Tobey came to Hofstra and they were gonna scrimmage. We had like a scrimmage. We like played, we played like a little game. It might have even been a referee there, but it was like a little bit informal. And it was at the end of the year. I don't even know if they had all their guys, but anyway, at the end they go, let's do some extra man and man down. So we go and we're doing our extra man, and we'd have our plays, but like you said, it's about execution because what are you going to take away from our extra man? And we had, whether it was you behind or whether it was Darren, depending on whatever our formation was, and even the guys, every guy was smart on the extra man. It was the execution of whatever the defense was doing. We were then finding where the weakness was and making the
Right.
play. We must have scored 10 times in a row like it was nothing, but it was execution. It was having some structure and then playing off of that structure. We didn't just go out
Yeah.
and just play it because sometimes
Yeah.
when you just play, it takes a little while to figure it out. We had a little structure and played off that structure, and we got into it quick when we were scoring every time. It was like crazy. I
Yeah. I
was like,
mean, yeah.
wow.
You think about it going back to when Posty was still playing. Postel was playing that left wing and shooting them in. And then we used to run plays where Mike Borriello was basically an extra man specialist. He scored, if you looked at the box score, you used to say, wow, this guy every game, 3-4 goals, because all he had to do was play extra man and he'd score 3-4 goals. He was
Right.
unbelievable.
And if they
And
and if they scouted him out and decided to take him away, it would be somebody else getting 3 or 4
right,
goals.
we figured it out, but you had all kinds of excellent guys when we did go with a guy behind, whether it was Bobby Engelke, Randy Natoli sometimes played at X. It changed around depending on who we needed. We had great shooters on the wing. We had guys who were good. Borriello was more of a cutter. His play was he used to get cross crease and he'd lay it was layups for him. Then the team morphed into where the play was when remember when Snapper Crowley came on the team. Matt Crowley put him on that right hand, shooting right handed on that wing. He was deadly
Yes.
until teams started to say, we can't let this guy get a shot over here. Then we changed the play and we went to something else and that worked.
Right.
It was like we adjusted. I don't see as much in terms of adjusting in some of these games with teams. It looks to me like when I watch a game, what they are is what they are for that game. I don't see much changing within the game with the teams, like let's get away from this. It's not really working. Let's go to this, because the game is as much as it's more micromanaged, they're still only doing the same kind of things all the time. So, and all I'm saying is, from a fan's point of view, a former player's point of view, or somebody who even coached a little bit, if I'm outgunned, I'm trying to figure out ways to, stay close with teams that I got to think out of the box. I can't try to beat them at their game. I'm not beating them at their game, you know.
Right.
But again, I know from going back and sitting with Richie Moran over the years and spending time with him, having dinner. He loved talking. He was a guy with the salt and pepper shakers, and showing you what he used to do. They had tremendous, through the years, going back to Mike French and Eamon McEnany and those whole teams, and Hondo and Billy Marino, and the list goes on and on. But he had structure to that offense. He really had a lot of structure to the offense. To me, just lining up, whether you're 1-3-2, going counting from behind, or going, 2-2-2, it's not so much structured as I've seen teams in the past that have had a lot of success. I mean, even Hopkins that one year, I think they won the national championship and were undefeated under Zim. Donnie Zimmerman. He was a great coach, Zim. He knew what he was doing, boy. Tell you that. And
Yeah.
whether we went deuces, whatever, there was times he'd call out a number, for an isolation as opposed to a motion offense. It was structured that way. And I think young guys need structure, because to me, they're still, you're in college, you're still really learning how to play. There's been so many great players that years after I said to them, you know, when did you think you really were at the peak of your game? Guys are like, 28 years old, 30. And these were great college players. And they're
Right.
like, I didn't realize how much I was lacking till I really started playing, even with some older guys who had more experience than me, and said, no, why are you doing that? Do this. It's easier. So, it's just an interesting conversation because I think that individually kids got to think about it more, how they can make themselves more valuable and how they can make themselves more successful. But I think the coaches have to figure out a way how to better how better, using kids. How do I get my best out of this particular kid at what he does? Ultimately, look, I've always said lacrosse is a game about, yes, of course, lacrosse IQ, all of that kind of stuff. But most importantly, lacrosse is about confidence. You got to play confident. If you're running scared, or I mean, I've seen games, college games, where a guy gets the ball and he's running and now he's clearing it, and it's just like he's like, "Am I onside? Is the guy not onside?" There's like hesitation and all, and then something happens. Guy back checks him, caught up to him or something because he's hesitant. You got to be confident in your decision making. You got to be confident that the other guys on your team are doing the right thing. You know, it can happen. You might turn on the jets and you're clearing it, and a guy went over already, and you went off. You ended up off sides, but that's not always on the guy carrying the ball. But this is what wins and loses games, because I've watched plenty of games this year, the Penn Syracuse game, the Harvard Syracuse game, these games, these one goal games, and these games that are going to overtime and everything. It's unbelievable, how these little things, we tend to focus on the one play that won or lost the game, right? But there's like 20 of those plays within the game. It's the old adage where the coach goes, well, that didn't, the kid who blew it. You go, you didn't lose the game for us. We had five other times, which is true, but there's something to be said about guys who have that clutch gene and guys who make those plays when you have to make those plays. But, this year of all years, man, look, I say it's anybody's game. It's not anybody's game. I mean, really, where you look at the rankings today, those top 10, I would say one of those teams is winning the national championship. I don't think anybody outside the 10 can win. Maybe stretch to 12. But I think,
Yeah.
the
But when you were going back to our time, it wasn't more than two or three.
no, that's true. No,
So
yes,
now
this
the
is
fact that you're
there's a
thinking
lot.
12
No, but
is a big
yeah,
deal. That's a big deal,
Yeah. Yeah, but it comes down to like you just said. Yes, it looks that way during the season, but then it always seems to come down to four teams anyway. It's but the gap is closed. I mean, look, like I said earlier, we were at that game, the Richmond Cornell game last year. They had Cornell on the ropes. They were right there with them. I
I
just thought, well,
I think I could get to 5 teams and say of who I think right now I would have to say has the best chances to win
hmm
it all. If I was going to say 5 teams,
yeah, go ahead.
I would say Notre Dame.
Right?
I would say UNC. I would say Syracuse.
Yeah,
I would say Princeton.
yeah.
And then the fifth one, I could argue about. I could say I would look at an outsider a little bit, and I would say maybe a Harvard, maybe a Richmond, somebody like that.
hmm
Really, the four. I would say I'm safe with one of those four. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, they really look strong. Those teams to me.
I'll reserve my opinion for give me 2 more weeks to watch some games and I'll let you know. We just don't know. Duke might be a juggernaut, you know.
Right?
Duke might be, might be they get into the meat of their schedule and they beat everybody still, I don't know.
Maryland makes Tillman go to work and retools, and next thing you know,
Yeah,
team
yeah.
comes along, and it's
That's what makes
through.
it so much fun for us right now. Yeah, we're hoping for those kind of situations.
Yeah, there's gonna be.
By the way, I like your shirt. You got the Jamaica
I got
lacrosse
yeah, I got
going
a
there?
little Jamaica.
Man, look out for Jamaica in the
That's
Olympics.
right. They're coming on. I think they
Who's
got
better, the Jamaica lacrosse team or the Jamaica bobsled team?
the Jamaica lacrosse team made it to number 7. I
I
think
know. They were pretty good.
they were good.
Yeah,
They're
they're
good.
pretty good.
That's my man Bog taking over on the under 19.
Yeah,
He went out and they were like number 6 or 7 there. So
that's
they're
great.
growing, they're getting better, and they're into it. That's half the battle of having emerging programs is the enthusiasm behind it. And
Yeah,
when you have a lot of enthusiasm behind it, you can achieve great things, and that's
yeah,
what they're doing. You know, but
yeah.
you know what we're not doing well is our picks. So for
Terrible. We think we know something. We're the worst.
wow, I
What do
mean,
I know? After all I told you, all these things, if I'm watching this podcast, you're like, this guy's talking about all kinds of things. You don't know anything. Can't
You
pick a
were
game.
you were 1-7 this week.
Yeah. Oh my
I
God.
think
That's
being one.
that's almost impossible.
I think it's harder. It's as hard as being 7-1.
Yeah, I could flip a coin and do
I
better.
mean, that is unbelievable. That
Yeah.
we weren't much better. Me and Smalley were 2-6.
Yeah.
But that's what shows you these crazy lines. Let me give you a couple games. We'll pick a couple games and then we'll send it to Smalley to get his picks.
Okay.
I'm going to put them up because there's a couple games on Tuesday that we can pick. So the first game is either these are an interesting game. So Dartmouth travels to Fairfield, and Fairfield is home and a 1.5 favorite.
I think Dartmouth's reeling from their beatdown. Didn't they get beat pretty good this
Yeah,
weekend? Didn't they travel out west or something?
yeah.
And yeah, I think they don't have their legs. I'm gonna go with Fairfield on that one.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna just say Vinny's streak continues. I gotta just hope that he's still going. I just go the opposite. No, I'm gonna go Dartmouth. I'm gonna say the
Yeah,
guys
listen, anybody who's really betting money on these things, just
go
pick
the opposite.
opposite of me.
Exactly. I'll pick Dartmouth, and I'll take the 1.5. Maybe it'll be a close game, but Fairfield's a tough team. They're doing pretty well. And the other
hmm
game is another tricky game with this 1.5. Jacksonville is home against Navy,
Wow,
and you never know
that's a
what
good.
Navy's going to show
Yeah,
up.
yeah, Navy. I don't know. Navy, they're a funny team too, but Jacksonville's had some good games. They're at home, you said?
Yeah, they're home.
All right, I'll go with Jacksonville at home.
And I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to give our friend Amplo and Navy a shot again. They had a couple hiccups there, but they had the big win against Penn State. So obviously they're capable. They're
Yeah,
capable.
no doubt. Yep.
That's that Patriot League's going to be tricky because it
Yeah.
looks like they're only going to get one team. Look, Army, what do you make of them, Vin? Let's just talk about Army quickly before we go. Army has those, they always come out, they always have a lot of wins, and then Lafayette beat them. I told you when we said it, I told you Lafayette's not a bad team. They're starting to
No.
emerge now. They
Yeah.
end of last year they were pretty good. And you know, there's a
Yeah,
lot
it's great to see. It's great to see, because it makes it more fun that, it's not automatic wins for these teams. But I think Army will get their stuff together. They're that kind of team. I think they'll be okay. I still look at them as the favorite for the Patriot.
okay.
I think Charlie Toomey's got Loyola playing better
Yeah.
now. They started slow, but they've been playing much better. So that Patriot League, it's always been a dogfight. There were times Lehigh was top dog for a little while, then it came down to an Army Navy. Army lately has been, the one winning it. It's going to be
And
interesting.
I've watched Colgate, and they don't have a great record, but they're pretty good.
Yeah, people thought, they lost the Connor brothers who've been doing well, but to lose how much of the scoring they did with the two of them, and that they're competing at the level they are, they can score. That offensive coordinator, and I apologize that I'm not sure his name or whatever, but I will say does a great job.
The problem for teams like Colgate, and I think that they're a pretty decent team and they can be competitive. It's when you're losing a lot, like they lost to Holy Cross. Maybe if they played Holy Cross in the beginning of the year, maybe they would have beat them. They start
Hmm.
taking losses, you start losing belief on how to win. It
Yeah,
really is a grind. You got to really try to hang in there because
yeah,
taking losses one after the other starts to get tough.
yeah. No, there's no doubt, but it's been a fun season, and I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah,
There's teams that are on the ropes. There are teams that some people in their minds might think they are overachieving, but I'm not so sure about that. This Carolina team looks tough, and they're relatively young. I mean, looking at that team, he's got some. I didn't know if they think they could really compete for the crown this year, but they are.
they're going to be
They're
in.
going to be tough. But I still think the two of the teams that I like for going long distance are Syracuse and Princeton. I think they're built to win games. I think especially being like Spallina, Leo, that freshman. I mean that the senior group that came in together as freshmen. They want nothing more than to go out with a national championship. They knocked on the door a little last year. It was the first time they'd been in the Final Four in a while, and I think they poised to make a run there too this year. With that senior leadership that they have, they got the pieces. The face-off guy is not as dominant as he's been in the last year. I think his numbers are down a little bit, and that gave them a little more of an edge. He seems to win them when he has to win them, you know. So he might not be giving them all that many possessions, but in these one goal games, he seems to get the ball when they need it.
Right.
Or tied games, he gets it. So to his credit.
The other,
That-
when you mentioned Princeton, the other thing that maybe even stands out even more to me with Princeton than Carolina and Syracuse, the guy's very good too, but the Princeton goalie is really good.
yeah, he's good.
I mean, they have a lot of pieces, but they got a solid piece there. And that's always the most important piece of any team to have. I don't know any team that I've ever
Yeah,
been on that I'm feeling comfortable. If we're good in the goal, then you can feel you play a whole different way.
yeah. No, I mean, we laugh amongst ourselves, when I talk with other high level players and like, oh, who would you pick first if you had your chance, and if, of all guys, Gary Gate, do you take this guy? And then I always say, give me a goalie.
Right?
start me with a great goalie, and I'll work from there.
Yeah,
But because when you have that stopper, it gets in the other team's head. They're just game
yeah,
changers. I
exactly,
think it's goalie's the most important player on the field to me.
exactly. So let's do some shout outs. We can do my shout out. I know who my shout out's going to be.
Okay.
My shout out is to the chaos of the PLL for winning the sixes thing.
Yeah, the challenge.
The funny part about that is it's the most non-chaos looking sixes winner that you would imagine. They never got to be in it or win it when they had all the Canadians burn and all of those guys, and they won now with a mostly American team. I don't think they have any Canadians now on the chaos. So
Yeah.
I think it's funny that they finally won that. They won that thing now with a mostly American team, where you would have
Yeah.
figured they were in it on those other times. They were for surely going to win it with Byrne and those guys, but they never actually won with Byrne, the sixes and things. So my shout out
Yeah.
to them. They did a good job. They got it was exciting. It came down tight games and they got the title. They got the chip.
Yeah. So my shout out is to all the high school teams. Some have started already in other states, but here in New York, and you know, specifically for me, my Chaminade team, they're getting ready to take on a very ambitious schedule, and I wish them luck. They have, a first head coach on the sidelines for them, different coach in 40 plus years since Jack Moran retired, and like I said, they've embarked on a very ambitious schedule. They have a lot of great players. I won't go down lists of players or nothing like that. I'm just saying in general, not only Chaminade, but all the high school teams. I wish them all a lot of luck. I look forward to watching a lot of the games here on Long Island that I can get to. Should be a lot of fun. I do enjoy that. I enjoy the rivalries. I enjoy seeing kids progress in their game and who got better from one year to the next. And, that's what's fun about some of these high school games. You go and you see a guy one year, the next year he's 5 inches taller and you say, wow,
Exactly.
so it's going to be a fun season. It looks like the weather is starting to cooperate with us down on the island. We're finally getting some better days, and I'm hoping that my Hofstra pride can get back into the playing in their stadium. They're getting a new turf put down. It got delayed because of weather and all. We got to get back playing there because I miss going to those games on Saturdays. So looking forward to what's coming.
All righty. Well, make sure, fans, make sure you get your picks in. We'll be putting them up on the stories. You guys are in the lead. We're chasing you. And make sure to follow on the Spotify, YouTube, or Apple. And this way, you know when we're gonna upload a new episode. We try to get weekly, but with Smalley, you never absolutely know.
Yeah.
He's lost in space right now.
Well, you got to remember, Stephen. He's in basketball mode. Also, he's a huge St. John's supporter.
That's
Some
true.
of you have probably seen him. We call him Bobby Courtside. He sits at courtside. He, I think he might have got one or two technical fouls against St. John's for him going on the court. They held the St. John's, the home team, responsible. But he's into that, and he's hoping that St. John's can make a Final Four run. We talk about it all the time. They look like they're built for it. They're very dangerous when they're playing in the Garden. We're going to have to see if they can be road warriors and what their seeding is and all. But I think this week is the Big East tournament, and next Sunday they'll be doing the selection show for March Madness. Okay, which is always really fun. And this season in college basketball has been insane. Teams are just beating each other left and right. So it really should be a lot of fun watching that.
Doubt, no doubt. All right, well, stay
All
tuned.
right.
Make your picks. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.